Start.
Hello and welcome to Basking in the Evergreen, where the champion of last week's Green Room, Randee, is coming on to talk to me for around an hour. And then after that, straight away, is the runner-up from last week, coming on to talk with Nikki DeKeuster. So before we start, if you people that are joining in, and we already have Nikki is already here. She's so keen.
There's that one person you said last time who was always the first person here. Is that Nikki?
Anita there, she's not here. She's been beat to it. So we've got some people coming in. So please chime in with your comments. Any questions for Randee, please ask them and we will get to them. Bienvenido, Nikki DeKeuster. And also, send a star to let our hosts and producers know how much you appreciate what they do here at Go Indie Now. Every time you contribute, you get entered into our season prize package drawing with gift cards, swag, and more. And at the end of the season is coming up very, very fast because we're already in the middle of November somehow.
We all need some gift cards and swag and everything because the holidays are coming up. So.
Exactly right. So for people who missed the Green Room last week, Randee, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, so my name is Randee Dawn. I am an entertainment journalist. I write for outlets including Variety and the Los Angeles Times, write about TV and film, and I am also the author of the debut novel. I should have this down pat by now. Tune in tomorrow. There we are. It is about a reality TV show run by mythical creatures for mythical creatures, but starring humans. It is quite silly. And I would never say this myself, but Publishers Weekly said that if you like Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett, you will like this book. So, it's that kind of humor. That's what you can expect.
Yeah, I've started reading it actually.
Oh, well, I hope you're enjoying it.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Because unlike a lot of people that have been on the Green Room and Basking in the Evergreen, I've actually met you in real life.
That is true. We were at FantasyCon, yes, right?
FantasyCon. Yeah,
right. That was quite something.
That's right. We were on a I think we were on a panel and a reading together, wasn't we?
Yes. Were we on the Light and Laughter panel, the actual one where we talk about humor? I've sort of mixed.
We weren't on that. We were on. Was it Writing in Contemporary Times? Was it?
There you are. Okay. Yes. Okay. That is correct. That makes sense.
And then we did a reading as well.
Right.
And you had a table that you were starting your book on.
Yeah, Guardsbridge Books was very kind to let me have my book on their table. So it was technically not my table, but they had.
You stole a space.
Yeah, well, they gave it to me. I mean, I didn't have to fight anybody or anything, but it was terrific to be able to be in the dealer's room and being able to tell everybody about the book.
Yeah, especially.
It's actually published by a British publisher. It's from Solaris, but I think that it's better known in America, maybe just because I'm an American author.
Right, exactly. What is this real life you speak of? Well, it happened. It was completely real, and this is what I was going to ask you actually, because one of the first things I was going to ask you was obviously you I think you live in Brooklyn.
I do, yeah.
South Brooklyn, and I met you in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
I saw recently that you were in the UK again, quite recently. Your publisher is owned by Rebellion Comics, who published Judge Dredd in 2000 AD and all that kind of stuff back in the day. So, are you ever in America?
I love being in America, but I've spent most of my life here, and as often as I can, I try to get across the pond. I'm very fond of being in the UK. I'm not ashamed to say I'm a bit of an Anglophile, and also a Celtophile. I love all things Scottish and Irish and all that too. It's just kind of the whole thing. But yeah, I love coming over. I was on a study abroad program when I was in college, and that was the first time I really got to visit. And I came back a few years later and wrote for some music magazines and did my best to get hired full time. But it is a challenge if you are not from the area. It's a challenge if you're from Britain to get hired at a job, but really a big challenge to get hired if you're not from the area. So yeah. So I'm happy to take advantage of what I've got now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely good to travel around. So how do you? Because obviously, when I met you at FantasyCon, which is probably very different to kind of for people. I was about to say it's Britain's biggest fantasy-only convention, but with that qualifier, that that's about 400 to 500 people. It's not very big compared to American ones. So how did you kind of obviously, I mean, I've seen you kind of go into kind of the bigger ones in America as well. And even kind of local ones would have a couple of thousand people there over the weekend and all that kind of stuff. British ones are a lot smaller. How do you find the difference between, selling your book in England compared to selling it in the States?
It's interesting because I've done a lot of hand selling. So I'll be behind the table and I'll find some way to cozen somebody over to the table, and then I get a chance to pitch my book. And I seem to do all right. People, once they hear the pitch of the book, they're like, "Oh yes, I think I need that thing." But it was a bit of a learning curve selling from FantasyCon versus the other American cons that I've been at. So I've only ever sold at American cons except FantasyCon. It was the first time I was selling in the UK, and it's probably not a huge surprise to say, "Oh, maybe a loud, brash American trying to sell you something is not going to be the first thing you're going to immediately walk over to and go, why, yes, please, do that." And I think that maybe the attendees of FantasyCon, while very keen to buy and very interested and big readers, may have been just slightly more reticent. So to be pitched at quite so hard. I'm at the cons that I go to in the US. It's very easy to. People are very happy when you call out and you say, "That's a really great bag you have," or "I love that shirt," or I tell you about my book, and they come over or they don't. But I think when I was at FantasyCon, it was more like, "I'll think about that. I'm just making a walk around. I'll be back later." And many of them were. That was the nice thing too. It's not just that they're sort of trying to find a way to back out kindly. So I think that was it was a bit of a scientific experiment or a sociological experiment, and it doesn't surprise me the way things went. But I was very happy that I was able to put it into as many people's hands as I did, and maybe next time I will have more that I can share, and I will have figured out how to modulate my pitch appropriately.
Right. Yeah. I did see a lot of people with it, because I was going to buy a copy of it, but I was traveling back to Ireland and I was like, well, I had to watch what I had in my bags, but I bought a digital copy on the way back instead. And it's very, very good. I'm really enjoying it. It's very funny. It is very humorous.
Thank you. And that actually does my heart good, because I think some of my favorite humor comes out of the UK. And so the idea that I can do something that is, yes, Americans think it's funny and that's fine, but the idea that I've always thought that, British humor is a little bit more difficult to thread that needle. And if I can get people in Britain who also think it's funny, then that's a huge win. Hugo Schmugo, Nebula Fabula. The fact that I can get folks in the UK who find it funny also, that does my heart.
Right, because culturally we're very similar, but also we're very, very different.
Right. There's that famous quote about the same culture separated by a pond or something like that. There's something like that.
Yeah, and Joe always brings a big bag to cons. It's not the size of the bag. It's paying for the luggage between when you're flying back with it.
That's why you're bringing the big bags. I see. That's what you tell yourself.
That's right.
Yeah, it is. It's about, but you don't want to have to check luggage. So I totally understand.
Well, the thing is as well, like the luggage sizes seem to have shrunk over the years as well. Like, so what used to be like you could get 30 or 25K is now 20, and they really charge you for it when you go over it as well. Like this,
they do.
You know, they didn't used to. Well, that's the way everything's gone.
Well, I think the other thing too is that my book, unlike a lot of the books at FantasyCon, is available through Amazon. I mean, it's not as though that was the only one place where you could possibly get it. It was the only one place you could possibly get it to get it signed.
That's right.
At that time. But I totally understand. A lot of the people in that dealer's room were indie authors and not necessarily as widely distributed or as widely available. So if somebody said, I want to carry a book home that is, I don't want to carry a book home that I can just probably order off Amazon later on, totally understand that.
Yeah. I did need the second sweater. It's always needed. Yeah, I mean that's the thing when you're kind of doing that kind of front facing selling in these kind of things. It's also kind of like, you know, at least give them the postcard or at least give them the bookmark or
right.
You know.
Yeah, I had stickers.
Yes.
If you met me for 5 seconds, you probably got one. But just for those who may not know, in the book, our main character is a struggling actor, and she's discovered while doing improv as a singing mango. And then later in the book, when she has to summon up her courage, she comes up with this mantra, you know, be the mango, you know, find that courage, be the mango. So I made these stickers that had a little cartoon mango floating in space. And then around it said the name of the book, but also be the mango. It's been a goal of mine to make be the mango a thing.
It's a good saying.
It's silly, and you know, mangoes are fabulous fruits, so why not promote? But anyway, yes. So I had stickers for people, and I did have some. I also had postcards as well.
Yes, yeah. So why don't you tell everyone a little? Because obviously this isn't the only thing that you've written, but why don't you tell everyone a little bit about Tune In Tomorrow?
About Tune In Tomorrow? Sure. So like I said earlier, it's about this reality TV show, mythical creatures, but starring humans. And the idea behind it really was, what TV shows or what movies would the Fae or mythical creatures watch? Because I can't just be all sitting around in a circle and having grapes and playing lyres or kidnapping Thomas the Rhymer to come over and sing for you for, you know, however long. So, you know, I think that those things are great and they're part of folklore, but I think that after thousands of years, immortal beings are probably going to go a little bit more with the times. And in the ways that we are fascinated with fantastical creatures and the ways that they live and the funky things they do, I think they would be equally as interested in us, but they would be interested in the kind of things that we would consider very mundane, because they don't have those things. They don't have to worry about writing a check. They don't have to worry about getting your driver's license. They don't have to worry about cooking dinner necessarily. They just snap their fingers. Magic does everything. So the idea that we have all these mundane tasks that we have to take care of that eat up the hours in our day, I thought, you know, that's the kind of thing they'd probably want to watch. Well, when the book was originally written, it was actually not a reality show. It was a soap opera. And I used to work at a soap opera magazine. And I thought, well, that's perfect, because although soap operas have these sort of grandiose stories, they are grounded in this daily routine. And I think that's even more true for British soap operas, you know, the EastEnders, Mission Streets, all of that. It's very grounded in working class and the minutiae of life, and occasionally a gangster or something. Right. So that's kind of what I was thinking when I was putting it together. And then again, I had worked behind the scenes at a soap opera magazine that had gone behind the scenes of TV shows. And there was a particular soap that I kind of had in mind when I was thinking. I was writing the backstage for Tune In Tomorrow and all of that. But then when it went to acquisition, and Solaris said, yeah, we really want this, but can you do it as, you know, can you do something other than a soap opera? How about a reality show? Because people watch reality shows. People don't really watch soap operas. And I said, well, I would disagree with you on that. But if you want my book, that is an easy enough change to make, because reality TV shows, not the competition ones, the other ones, they're kind of the soap operas of our
Mm.
modern era. You know, people have to talk about whatever the Kardashians are doing at the time, or even though something like Big Brother, which is a competition show, it grounds itself in the silliness of small things in daily life among these various strangers that are living together. So they are the modern soap operas. So to me, that was actually very easy to make that change. It was a bit like taking off of one layer of paint and putting on a different layer. And there is a part later on in the book where I actually make that same sort of argument, where the actress who is hired, she's sort of like, well, you know, so reality shows are kind of like soap operas, and she talks about how reality shows are scripted, and even if they tell you they're not, there's always some sort of script going on. So that was pretty easy to do. And then it was also about making it a little more modern in some places. Like, we didn't want to make it just about television. We wanted to incorporate this idea of streaming, because the way most people seem to watch TV these days is through some form of internet or streaming. And I thought, all right, well, how do we work streaming into this sort of conversation? And I thought, well, scrying bowls have been popular for mythology and fantasy for many, many decades, and that's got water, and you look into it and you see stuff. So I thought, all right, let's have that be the delivery method for the programming that's being made. Tune in tomorrow. There's an implication, a small, like a background reference, and maybe later in the book there's a bit more of it. The fact that other TV shows and other forms of programming are going on, but we're not involved with them right now. We're just focused on this one show. So if somebody wants to watch a fae made or a mythical made TV show, that's how they would do it, in some sort of form of running water.
Yeah. Nikki agrees with you. She says reality TV is a soap opera. That's what
absolutely. You know, well, the thing is, we have soap operas everywhere too. I mean, Grey's Anatomy is a soap opera. Yes, you know, it's stuff that we would not label as soap opera. It uses the tropes of soap opera. So yeah, it's everywhere.
Pro wrestling is
something I'm working on right now. Actually, sort of doesn't incorporate fae in pro wrestling, although that would be fun. But also takes a particular kind of character and works in the sort of idea that they're doing the job as a form of pro wrestling for the masses.
Nikki is also a fan of making the mundane pop, made it the focus of an entire novel. Because soap operas are a weird one.
Thanks, Nikki.
Because obviously, like where I'm from in the UK, which is I grew up in just outside of Manchester, so Coronation Street has been on for nearly 70 years at this point now, I think.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I was in Coronation Street a few times as well.
Were you? I did not know that.
Yeah, so I was only like a background kind of thing. When I was in college, I wanted to do a film in college, so I was doing like a bit of like extra work just to kind of see sets and all that kind of stuff. So I was on Coronation Street a few times, just in the background.
Do you have a character, or were you just like background?
No. It's just I suppose I was the same character, I suppose, but like, but I was just like, I was wandering around the street, or just like in the pub, even though I was not 18. In some of them, and other things. But yeah, I kind of did the tour of them. I did Hollyoaks, Brookside, which is a Liverpool-based one, Emmerdale, which was one that's set in Yorkshire Dales. And they, at one point, they decided that they wanted to kind of refresh the cast, so they crashed a plane into the town.
Right.
Most of the cast.
That's classic soap opera. It's like, well, we've got to make a big change. Let's just have everybody, like, there's a serial killer in town all of a sudden.
Right.
It's like very much like that. But yeah, I did a tiny bit of extra work myself. I'm not necessarily against doing more, but I got to be an extra on Law and Order once. So.
Oh yeah, Law and Order. Yeah, okay. Yeah,
it's a different kind of show.
I never got shown. It's kind of fun. I did it a little bit in my 20s as well when I came to Ireland. Obviously, they did film Game of Thrones and Vikings here. But I didn't do Vikings, but I did do Game of Thrones.
Oh, you did? Okay. Can we see you? If I go back to an old Game of Thrones, can I see?
Yeah, there is a couple of episodes where you can. I'm quite clearly seen in it. But so I had hair in those days, and I have quite dark hair, which is not what you wouldn't expect from my beard. So when so I was playing people that were on the wall or north of the wall.
Okay.
And
were you a wildling then?
So I was a wildling, but I was also a night's watchman as well.
Okay.
Changed and
versatile.
Yeah. So so the first time I went up, they put a note on the thing saying if you can grow your own beard, grow a beard, because obviously not every man can grow a beard. You know, some people are very good at growing beards, and it saves on wigs and what have you and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I could grow a beard, and it was very, very ginger. I had no grey in those days, so I grew a beard, had my dark hair and everything, and I went up to the kind of the costume fitting on the first day and all that kind of stuff. And the woman behind the desk looked at me and was like, "Do you dye your hair?" And I was like, "No, it's just the way it is." And she was like, "We're gonna have to put a wig on you because we can't have it'll just look too strange." So I had to wear this big ginger wig and then to match my beard. And then she also said to me, "You don't have to do an accent because you've not got any lines." And I was like, "This is my real accent."
You're so perfect. Why couldn't they have put you in many other places? They did have a great big tall redhead guy. You could have had that role.
I could have been him. Yeah, I could have been him. But it was funny because they were just thought he's really getting into this with the accent and everything. It's like, no, it's just how I sound.
That's right. It doesn't cost you anything extra. A friend of mine actually once went up for an extra role, and there was a hair-related issue, which is why I'm bringing it up. But he said that he went to the auditions, and there were so many of them that they asked half of them to go and get their heads shaved and then come in for the audition. And then the other half got to just do the audition. And I thought that's a lot of investment to go get your head shaved just for a potential extra role. And so he went and got his hair shaved. It used to be quite straight. And when it came back in, it was this long, curly, Kenny G kind of hair. I mean, I thought it was great looking, but he said it was completely different than it used to be. And I never thought that would ever happen. Like if you cut off your hair, why would it not come back?
Yeah, it does.
I've heard since that people
it
come
does,
back.
Yeah. It does. I was the opposite. I used to have quite curly hair. And then I shaved it all off when I was 16, 17. Okay. And it came back completely straight. Same colour, but completely straight. So I shaved away the curls, basically. Is this the origin? Nikki also says it's the origin of David's beard. No, it isn't. So I got rid of it when I wasn't doing Game of Thrones, and then when I shaved all my hair off and let it go, I was like, too much face. I need something. I need something. Too much face. So,
I think for what it's worth, that your beard will eventually have its own memoir.
Maybe it's gone much grayer in the last 2 months as well, which is crazy. It's gonna be. I won't have to put talcum powder in my beard to be Santa next year.
I have a friend who actually very much rocks the Santa look. Does not have to do any talcum powder. He just is. Scares the follicles straight. That's hilarious.
There's a guy you'll see him if you come to any more of the British conventions next year. There's a guy who just looks exactly like Santa.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I took a picture of him. I was sat next to him somewhere recently. I took a picture of him. I sent it to my son. I was like, "Look, sat next to Santa." I was like, I told him.
I will be coming to I know this isn't British, but I will be coming to the Glasgow.
Oh yeah, well, it's still British. It's British, yeah.
I don't want to offend any Scottish nationalists.
No, they're British. It's okay. It's Republic of Ireland. Republic of Ireland isn't, but everything else is.
It's true.
Yeah.
I'm going to come out to Glasgow because any excuse, I'm there.
Well, I will see you there because I'll be there for a couple of days at least. I think. It'll be quite good. But you kind of have to when it's a World Con that's in the UK. Kind of have to go to it.
It's a requirement. You get your papers in the mail, and it's like you must be here.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So anyway, back onto your work. You're quite a variant. Not even quite. It's the British Floridans.
Now now, that's that's not fair for the Scottish. Let's not go with
Yeah, I think the
bring
English are
Florida
more
into
like,
all of this.
yeah, I think the English are more like the Floridans, to be honest.
I think for many years, I was always told the folks from Essex were the Floridians.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, probably is. I think in the UK, I think like everyone that's in Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland are kind of like embarrassed to be around the English. To be honest.
Yeah, that seems to have been increasing in recent years.
Yeah, Londoners. Yeah, definitely Londoners. Anyway,
Yes,
um,
but I digress.
before we get into any trouble with any Southern English people, don't know if there's any Southern English people that watch, but we'll find out. We'll know in the comments soon. So you've got a very interesting career outside of. I mean, it's all kind of revolved around writing because, as you said at the top there, that you did quite a lot of writing for likes of Today.com, Variety, Los Angeles Time, Emmy Magazine, and it was all kind of based around film and television. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'll go back even a little bit further. It's been long enough that this kind of thing is not on the resume anymore, and it was sort of pre-internet, which tells you how old I am. But my earliest writing was writing about music. So I wrote about bands and did reviews of albums and went to concerts and things like that. And when I was in the UK studying abroad, and then when I came back later on, I wrote for some of the music papers. So there used to be an indie glossy magazine called Lime Lizard, and I wrote for them for a long time. That was interesting. It never really quite got going. It went around for a while, but that was a lot of fun because the design was really beautiful. There was a period of time, I think, in the 90s, early 2000s, when magazines, particularly British ones, they just had these beautiful designs, and it was really beautiful to look at. I was happy to have my articles in there. And then I also did some reviews that turned up in the NME. So I knew there was an editor there for a while named Tommy Udo, who I was friends with. We became good. We became friends, and I did reviews for him and a lot of news bits. Early on, the U.S. had better internet than the UK, and so I would get these news reports just by going on the internet, and then I'd call them in London and be like, "I have news for you," and write it up, get it over there.
Right.
That went away as soon as you all actually got your own proper internet. But for a while there, I had kind of.
And that was like not until the early 2000s as well.
Right, exactly. So I had a bit of a leeway there. And then I did, I moved into. I think there was something for me. I still love music, and I'm very passionate about the music that I'm into. But I think that somewhere after my 20s is when the passion for new stuff just kind of faded a little bit. I had tens of thousands of songs on my iPod by then, and like the file cabinet had gotten almost full up, and I just didn't feel the same way about writing about music. So I was like, well, if I'm going to keep doing this journalism thing, I need to start writing about other stuff. And hey, I watch a lot of TV. Let's see if we can start writing about TV, and film came after that. So I started doing freelance while I was in college about TV and film. And then afterward, I just continued trying to freelance for basically whoever would take it. And sometimes it was music, and sometimes it was TV and film. And then I got the job at the soap opera magazine, and it became mostly TV by then. And then I also started writing about, I have to define iPod for the kids out there.
Yeah.
iPod was the dream, honestly, because I walked around with cassette tapes. When you traveled, you had to take like 7 cassette tapes, and it was this big, and it was heavy, and you packed as much music as you could onto them.
Yeah.
And that was all the music you got to take with you while you went. And even CDs weren't better, really, because they were heavier.
No, CD players were worse because if you were walking, or if you were in like a car and it was on an uneven road,
it would jump.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
It would skip.
Yeah.
And the lost art of the mixtape, it's a whole cultural thing. If you liked somebody, you would make them a mixtape, and you put all the songs up, and meant something to you. So, but when the iPod came around, it was like, that kind of romance of the cassette tape was gone. But on the other hand, I can walk around for very little weight extra, carrying around very little extra weight, and had thousands and thousands and thousands of songs.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started writing about TV and film, and that was interesting. Sometimes people ask, and maybe this is one of your questions or whatever, but sometimes people ask, oh, well, who's the most, who are some of the famous people you've talked to? And in general, what I tend to say is that actors are not that interesting to talk to. I mean, it's a combination of, unless they're the creators of the material. Oh yes, The Young and the Restless. Sorry, there's a question from Nikki that just popped up. The Young and the Restless is it's still going, and it's classic. But yeah, actors are kind of like the vessels in which the creation is going into, and they sometimes have things to say about that, but it also tends to sound very sort of in your nose, like, oh yes, let me tell you about my process. Whereas I'm much more interested in talking to the people who actually create the stuff, or who are putting the art together, the directors, the writers, even the producers sometimes. Those people are much more interesting to me because they just have more concept to talk about. Now, some actors do fill those roles too, and then that's interesting to me on a different level. But the other problem with talking to actors, especially in more, I don't know, recent years, is that they're so nervous about either being misquoted or going viral for the wrong thing, that they're very cautious about what they say. And they often have PR just sitting around waiting to swoop in and say, that's not actually what she meant. So they're
they can't really say anything about what they worked on either.
Yeah, well, often what they're doing is they are promoting the thing that is the most recent thing, and you have a long lead time with when it's going to be published. So like on Wednesday, I'll be talking to Vanessa Kirby for the new movie Napoleon. Well, that's not quite out yet. It won't be out for a little bit. So we're just writing things ahead of time. And I'm sure, and I'll take back anything about actors not being interesting. Vanessa Kirby is wonderful. Vanessa, if you're listening, I'm sure you're fabulous, and we'll be happy to talk to you. But yes, for me, the most interesting interviews are often with people you probably haven't heard of, and in part because they don't have to protect themselves in the same way that actors do.
Yeah,
They just have to have more say.
quick deadlines on soaps and that kind of writing room. Because I mean, there's a couple of very long running ones in America, isn't there? There's The Young and the Restless, there's Days of Our Lives as well, which is probably.
Although Days of Our Lives is not technically on terrestrial TV anymore, it's moved over to streaming, which is fine. It is still going. Okay. The longest one that ran for a very long time was something called. It started out as The Guiding Light, and then became The Guiding Light, but it actually started in radio. And it went all the way through the 90s and in the early aughts. I don't know the exact date that it ended, but that was one of those. It changed mediums and still survived and did really well.
We're still going on.
Still going on. Well, it's not anymore. But Young and the Restless, Bold and the Beautiful, Days of Our Lives, and General Hospital. I think those are the 4 American soap operas that are still extant.
The big ones.
When I was in high school, when I was a teenager, I was mad for General Hospital. They had a whole spy thing going on, and they had a lot of Anglophone actors. So there was an actor a couple actors from the UK. There was at least one from Australia, and I was just like, talk to me, I'm here. That was all just my milieu. So I was a big fan back.
So when you've because you did actually steal one of my questions a little bit that I was going to ask you.
Ask it anyway, and I'll give you a different answer.
Yeah, well, I've tweaked it on the fly. So who's the most? Because obviously you say you prefer to kind of talk to like the creators behind the camera kind of way, because like you said, like with actors these days, it is kind of a minefield. I saw something about someone asked Adam Driver a very silly question about a film. He told him to basically fuck off. Basically, he's getting some crap for it, but some people like fair play to him as well. But and there's that kind of thing as well. Like especially if they're working on these kind of big studio movies, that they can't really say anything anyway. They're not allowed to talk about anything that happens in the film. But what's the most kind of starstruck have you been from someone that you've met and when you've been doing your work?
Well, So I only very briefly ever got to meet and quote unquote interview George Clooney. I was doing an article for something that he appeared in as they did a remake of Catch 22 a couple of years ago, and he was in it just as a small role, but he was also an executive producer. So I had interviewed the main actor in this hotel, and this whole junket was going on in this hotel. And as I was leaving that interview, like he was sort of coming in the other direction. I said, "Can I just ask him a quick question? Because I got to be able to say that I, you know, stood in the presence of George Clooney." And so I only got one question with him, and he gave me like a full 4 minutes. Perfectly nice. Did not act like he was trying to get away from me or anything. But I cannot say that we had a special moment or anything. Like he's doing a job, I'm doing a job. But I was a little starstruck getting to interview Neil Gaiman.
Oh yeah,
which I did a couple of years ago when Good Omens was first coming out. They did a special screening in New York, and again, there was the whole junket, and he was nothing but gracious. He is, I won't say we know each other except through that interview, but he is a friend of a friend. I know authors quite well who he is friends with. And he was delightful and charming and sort of exactly what you would expect Neil Gaiman to be. And I almost don't want to say starstruck, only because it was so easy to be in his presence, as opposed to somebody who you just can't get the words out because and I think that has something to do with the person in the room too. Like, yes, you can be starstruck, but they can find a way to make things easier.
Yeah.
Problem. And I think I've done so many interviews over the years that it's not that I can't get starstruck, but it's more like I understand everybody is a person. And they all have their little foibles, and in general, nobody is more special than anybody else. I think, actually, I'm sort of reflecting on the fact that I think maybe my version of starstruck is I get obnoxious. Like, I'm just going to just be obnoxious to you, and then you'll remember me because, like, everybody else would just be fawning all over you. And a bunch of years ago, there was a promotional event that Duran Duran played at, and I was a big fan of Duran Duran. And after the show was over, I managed to get myself into the sort of backstage tent. Now, I was there representing a publication, so it wasn't entirely like, oh, I'll just sneak back here. But the whole band was back there, and I'm standing with the PR person, and Simon Le Bon, literally bounces over, and he seems like a lovely person, and God bless him. He's kept a marriage going and rock and roll all these years, and I shouldn't have anything bad to say about him. I really don't. But he's kind of a doof. He's a goofy guy, and that was just so counter to my teenage expectations that he would just be a complete goof. So he bounces over, and he's got like this. That's like this sweatband. You can wear a sweatband when you're exercising or whatever. And he has a sweatband, and he puts it on his head, and he says to the PR person who I'm standing next to, he says, "So, do I look like Tupac?" And my response to that should have been like, "Why, yes, you're so very handsome, and yes, you look just like Tupac, sure." And I said, "No, more like LaToya Jackson." And I'm sure he was just like, "Who the hell is this person, and why is she talking to me this way?" But that's kind of, I think that when I'm starstruck, that's my default.
That's what you do.
Well, than I would be otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I think he probably ever so often he probably just looks in the mirror and thinks, "Do I really look like LaToya Jackson?"
Yeah, I'm sure that has lingered with him all this time. Echoes in the back of his mind.
Yeah, it's just like
an amazing journalist. She told me something about myself I never.
So it seems that your meeting with Neil Gaiman was more impressive than George Clooney, which is not a surprise, seeing as
we had this is going to sound really bad, but I'm going to say it this way anyway. We had 45 minutes in a hotel room. Yeah, exactly. No, sitting in chairs and talking to one another.
I'm going on Twitter right now. I'm on Twitter and I'm typing it.
45 minutes in a hotel room with Neil Gaiman.
Yeah.
Randee on. He posed with me for photos afterwards, which you're technically not.
I bet he did.
But yeah, exactly. And but there was one of the speed bumps you sometimes encounter as a journalist is You go in to do the interview, and the PR person decides to linger. She decides to stay in the room, and hate that. I understand why they try it, but if you're going to have a one-on-one conversation with somebody, or even a 2-on-1 conversation with somebody, and there's somebody in the room who's not going to participate in the conversation and who might actually try to interfere with the conversation, that just changes the whole tenor of everything, because it becomes more performative and less of a potential, information share. And so I asked her if she would wait in the hallway, and she got like a little stroppy with me. She's like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, really. Would you go?" And she went, and it was great. And I turned to Neil and I said, "I'm sorry. I hope that was all right." And he goes, "No, that was amazing." So, so that's the kind of response that makes him endearing, is that he was on the same wavelength.
That's good. And Good Omens was great as well.
Yes.
So was George Clooney as gorgeous in real life as he is? He was.
Yes, he really was. He was tall. He was not as tall as I thought, but he was tall, and he was very good.
No actors are as tall as you think, though, apart from the really, really clearly big ones. They're all quite short.
Well, Tim Robbins is pretty tall, and once they're over about 6 feet, the reason that they look so much taller is not just that they are tall by average standards, but that most actors are quite short.
Yes.
And do their best to hide it.
Yeah, they do. When I was doing there was probably only one of the principal actors was taller than me on Game of Thrones, and that was Tormund, who is the giant. But he wasn't even that tall that much.
That's the redhead. Tormund was the other redhead. So
he was, yeah. He was like about an inch or two taller than me, but then everyone else was way shorter. It's it's funny just to see all the setups about how the kind of Jon Snow can't be smaller than this person, so we need to make sure that this is like this and this is like this. And it's so much time goes into it of them just blocking and staging the shot.
And I feel like it makes me sad too, because there's nothing wrong. I mean, there shouldn't be perceptually anything wrong with being a shorter man. I don't think that's a turnoff. I don't think it needs to be a turnoff. I don't think it should be a turnoff. But I think the thing is they keep on supporting this whole idea of the men have to be taller than the women, or it's going to look weird. You can have Brienne on Game of Thrones, and she's bigger than some of the men, but basically, she's Brienne. But I think societally, it's a shame that men should not have to always be taller than women. Women should not have to be choosy about that like that. I've dated guys who were shorter than me.
Well, I've never had that problem, but
you've never dated guys that were shorter than you?
No, not yet. No, there's always time, I suppose. I did go out with a girl once who was 5'11", so she was quite tall.
And did that feel weird in any way? I guess you're taller than 5'11", so. Yeah,
I was still a few inches taller anyway. And she wore heels were about the same height, but I didn't care really. It was didn't really care at all. It's a strange one. But anyway, we'll go back to because you mentioned before that also we were talking about extra work, and you had been on Law and Order, but you've also co-written the unofficial companion.
The Law and Order SVU unofficial companion. Yeah, not the main show that was already written before I got involved, but the co-author of the one who did the Law and Order unofficial companion wanted to do an SVU version, and she reached out to me because her fellow co-author from the first book didn't want to do that. Right. So that was terrific. That was amazing. It was, of course, when we wrote it, the book came out in 2009. And when we wrote it, we were like, well, we're on season 12. I guess they'll probably have a couple more seasons. Do a little follow-up, maybe put an addendum in there, a second edition. Had no idea it would still be going on to this day. I mean, it just blows my mind that that show is still on.
There was a real thing. I don't know what it was like. It was just before streaming came in. There's that kind of anything. There was a bunch of stuff that came out in the early 2000s that just stuck around for a very long, Supernatural, Smallville, all these things that were on for just years, and they had this base where it's it's making enough money for us that we might as well just keep doing it until they're too old to do it anymore.
Well, the other thing too is not to get too wonky, but there are, Nikki just wrote, you have some grit to do an SVU deep dive. We each watched half of the episodes to do an extensive episode guide for the back of the book. And I have to tell you, after watching that many shows in a short period of time, I would take the dog out for a walk and just be very paranoid all of a sudden. Like, is this the moment where the episode begins? What were we just talking about before that? You were saying about, what did you ask me just before that?
About just things that kind of stayed around for a long time.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So yeah, not to get too wonky or anything, but so traditionally when television would have these sort of ebbs and flows where episodics were a big deal for a long time. And an episodic being a show that essentially was self-contained. You could watch one episode and you didn't have to have seen episodes around it. And then those would sometimes go out of fashion, and you'd get these much more linked shows that you had to know the whole aspect of the soap operatic stuff, the Grey's Anatomies. But I think streaming changed a lot of that, and they started doing binging became a thing. They would dump a whole season at once, so it almost didn't matter if they were episodic or if they were very complex and you had to know them all, because you could watch them in your own time frame. And I think that one of the reasons that these kind of shows have stuck around is that while we like the really complex, difficult arcs where you have to know who all the players are and you kind of got to watch the whole thing, episodics remain comfort television. I don't know about you all, but like in this country, if you're like sick at home in bed and you have to just sort of, I got to be in bed for hours and hours, people put on Law and Order and just let it run. Because you can come at any point in any Law and Order episode and be like, I know the players, I know basically where they're going with all of this, and it's like comfort TV, even if it's horrific comfort TV. And whereas people don't do that with some of the bigger streaming shows that have been very popular. So I think that's part of the reason some of these shows have lasted. Star Trek Strange New Worlds is kind of episodic in that way. And I think that's why it's having success.
Yeah, it is. So what was I was kind of talking a bit about the writing as well, but we're actually kind of running out of time. But you have to come back another time.
I'll have to win another one.
You have to win another one, yeah. So people always ask, like, what did you get into kind of writing? But obviously you've been writing about things for a very, very long time. So like different types of ways. So what was it where you decided that you wanted to kind of start moving into narrative?
The thing is, I always wanted to write narrative. I mean, I wrote short stories about my stuffed animals. When I was in school, I would write these chapters of a book, and then I would hand the chapters to my friends. And it was, it's not quite the same as Charles Dickens' chapters showing up and people clamoring at the piers. What's the next episode? Did little Nell die? All that stuff. But it was kind of cool because they were reading the book as I was writing it in a lot of ways. And that was when I was still in I was the same age as some of the kids that I taught, that I was doing some substitute work with today, the 12-year-olds, the 13-year-olds. And, so I've always wanted to do that, but I also had this real practical side of me, which said, that doesn't pay very well. You're probably almost certainly going to have to get a real job until, with luck, perhaps this other thing would take off. And I still wanted to write. And I think it was my mom who said, well, you could be a journalist. And I was like, tell me more. So I just started taking more journalism classes. It was a chance to write and get good at it and be professional with it. But in retrospect, the two don't really overlap that much. I think writing for magazines and seeing how PR works did help with me trying to market this book. Mm-hmm. But one did not really give me much of a leg up into the other. I probably could have been a teacher or another job entirely, and still gotten the work done. But it all worked out the way it was supposed to. And of course, I wouldn't have had the background knowledge of Tune In Tomorrow if I hadn't worked in entertainment journalism. So much. Right, yeah. So it all folded together nicely. Next episode of Randee Dawn Stuffed Animals. Who killed J.R. Care Bear? Yeah, exactly. I need to do the crossover of Law and Order as stuffed victims unit, and and my stuffed animals. So yeah,
hippo.
It was the hippo. Shh! Yeah. Don't say anything, Justin. So yeah. Yeah, that was really just, I always wanted to be a published fiction writer, but I was also very shy about showing it around to
Yeah.
people I could.
So what are you working on next? What is next for you? Because obviously, Tune In Tomorrow is out and is available, and it's been
Yep.
out for a couple of years at this stage. So what are you working on next? What's coming out next for you?
Well, I am working on a book in a different universe because due to the vagaries of the industry, a follow-up to Tune In Tomorrow. I do have an idea for a follow-up, but it wouldn't be the same characters. It would just kind of be in the same universe, like a different film medium in the Tune In Tomorrow universe. So cross fingers, I'll be able to get that out. But the main thing I'm focusing on right now has to do with superheroes and sort of giving them a bit of a Tune In Tomorrow twist, like that they're performing for television. That's the one I was referring to earlier about the wrestling. They're kind of they're not really fighting each other because they're trying to take over the world. That's too difficult, and it's just nobody really wants you to do that. They all just want to do it just to be able to have fights, and battles and rumbles and shenanigans and all sorts of things like that. So they do it for the TV money.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's the story that I'm working on right now.
That sounds good. I mean, obviously, again, your career is probably kind of will inform a lot of that as well, because you've kind of seen like the rise of the superhero genre as being
yes.
the rise and possibly fall of it as we're in at the moment. But
right. Well, this is the challenge, because not everybody wants to publish superhero books, but to me, this is sort of I don't want to say it's taking them down. I don't want to say I'm insulting superhero books, but I wanted to also have a little bit more of a discussion about, well, what if they were actually useful? What if they actually did things in the world as opposed to constantly having to take it over or fight one for good reason?
Yeah.
So that's part of the discussion I want to have too.
Yeah, it's an interesting one as well, because I mean, you do. There's either like two kind of takes on superheroes really at the moment. You have superheroes that are very kind of fighting their supervillains and kind of doing that, or you have stuff like The Boys where it's like these superheroes are actually really terrible people, and so there's a real middle ground that you can kind of explore there.
I'm hoping so. I'm hoping that we get some interest, and that a publisher will be brave enough to put that out there.
Oh, hopefully they will. And so is it kind of like a fantasy take on it as well, or?
Yeah, I would say it's less it's kind of alternate universe. Let's say alternate universe. So it's familiar territory. It looks like New York City, for example, but the superpowers are very gender and non-binary specific. So let's just say that I'm working on that part of things, and that puts a twist in things. Mm-hmm. And then you have this discussion about look, the city is actually in need of help from people who have special abilities. Can you maybe dial back the world wrestling and maybe help us with our sewer system or something like that? So I wanted to have that, because to me, I understand why we like superheroes and why we like comics, but I like the idea of, look, if these people really exist and they actually have real powers, then can we find a way to make the world better rather than just making it about, destroying cities because somebody from outer space has come out and has come Superman to save us. So that to me is the more interesting angle of things.
Yeah, because I kind of sometimes think that, and I have the same kind of thought of from epic fantasy as well. So epic fantasy and superheroes. If you're like, and I like superheroes, I love epic fantasy, but I always kind of think that if you're just a regular person that lives in, say, the MCU version of New York, or you live in like epic fantasy city, you must be terrified every single time not even stepping outside of your door, because
there's always something, either a big monster is closing in on the village, or the king is completely corrupt and just wants to steal all your money. I mean, it sounds like a terrible place to live. So I just feel like it would be so good if people found a creative way to talk about how we can use these things to make everything better.
Sounds interesting. Yeah, because it's that whole thing where you talk about the cities being destroyed and stuff like this. It could be something, because that's the same again. Superheroes and epic fantasy, all these people with magic that can just just suddenly decide to completely level the entire like city if they wanted to, but it's like just there, just trying to feed your family and make it through to the next day.
I know. I'm just trying to get elected to city council. That's one of my characters. It's like I just want to get
Right.
stop ruining my election campaign.
Exactly. So and have you and it's don't let David get about celebrating.
Please do tell.
I won't.
All right, I'm out.
I will. I signed with an agent this morning, so that's
congratulations. That's awesome.
Strange. It wasn't about superheroes or anything, so it's
that's okay.
And what was I going to say then? Nikki's completely sidetracked me.
Nikki, look what you did.
How dare she? Yeah, so you've kind of done that.
I apologize. That is a phone in my room suddenly ringing.
I thought it was Joe. I thought it was
apologize.
Like a 5-minute warning.
All right, 1 second. All right, they're gone. Sorry about that, everybody.
That's all right. I thought, because we have 5 minutes left, so I thought that was Joe with the 5-minute warning. But what I wanted to say was, obviously, you've done fantasy, you've done contemporary fantasy, you've done a little bit of horror as well. You've done some other things. So, is there one genre that you kind of see yourself going back to, or do you like to play around in all the different kind of genres?
I like playing in all the sandboxes, but I think what I tend to lean toward is modern retellings. I like taking the characters or taking the fantasy or taking the horror or whatever. I like a modern concept. So it feels familiar, but then it takes a left turn, or it takes a right turn. That tends to be what I go to. I nothing against epic fantasy. People should be doing epic fantasy. You do epic fantasy. Sometimes. So I no problem with that. That's not an area that really attracts me as a reader or as a writer. So I'm fine with my little urban fantasy / contemporary fantasy niche. And I have discovered with Tune In Tomorrow that I like writing funny when I can write funny. I cross my fingers that everybody else feels that way.
And like humor. Obviously, I write urban fantasy as well, and humor kind of ties in very, very easily with urban fantasy as well. I mean, a lot of different genres do.
Yeah, I heard you read some from one of your stories, I believe, and it was very funny.
Thanks very much. And that's the good thing about urban fantasy, though. You can kind of really fit in other subgenres with it quite well. It can be, it can be quite horrific. It can be quite funny. It can be quite thriller. It can be, there's a lot of different ways. It's quite a flexible genre.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily we need to stick to a single genre. I think that's very limiting. And the more people that are blending these things, I mean, I've heard of science fiction fantasy, as a combo story, and I have no problem with that. I think that makes things more interesting and less expected. It's not the same damn thing every time. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, let's blend away.
Exactly. So yeah, exactly. So Randee, thanks so much for coming back, and congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me. It was exciting. This was a great conversation.
It was good. Yeah, it's great, and congratulations for winning the green room. So where can everyone find you and your books?
So if you see my name in the green letters here, and you go to randeedawn.com, no space, just randeedawn.com, or if you can't remember that, then look at the title of the book. tuneintomorrow.com also works, and that'll take you to the book. That'll take you to everything else I'm working on. I always link to the articles that I've recently published, so you can pull those things up as well. And there's a contact form, so if you want to reach out to me. And I would also say, and this goes for you too, David, if you finish the book and you really like the book, please reach out. And there is an epilogue chapter that did not fit into the book, and I will send you that PDF.
Oh, very nice. And also review it.
Oh, yes. Well, please. That I certainly hope that you will review it and review it well.
I know I will, but hopefully everyone else will as well. So thanks again for coming on. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And next up, we're going to have a little word from our sponsors, which is Joe, but also a sponsor from someone else. And after that, it will be Nikki DeKeuster talking to Jessica Nettles. So stay tuned for that. Tune in after the advert. Thanks again.
They can never know what I am or what I do. They can never know, and that's why I stay away. It's a pledge I took a long time ago when I realized what I was capable of. Kind of like the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. But, if you must do harm, make damn sure they deserve it. You think I killed Darius Canello?
No, Miss Venture. We know you did.
I may be incorporeal, but I've got the energy of a gale force wind. Imagine that ripping through the space between your cells, twisting up your guts and tangling all your blood vessels. It's powerful enough to knock you over, and I'm guessing it hurts like a bitch.
I lead, you follow. I ask you a question, you answer it. If you cannot help, then stay out of the way. And when this is over, we'll see who is right and who is guilty.
Make a wish, press a button, send a message to the big dark something you don't even know is there. How many of those dreams will come true, and how many turn into nightmares?
She's not a killer. She's more of an accident waiting to happen.
Did he just make a joke?
Hello?
Hello.
All right. I don't know. Everything went quiet for a second. Hello. Welcome to the second portion of Basking in the Evergreen with my guest, Jessica Nettles. Hello, Jessica.
Hi.
And I am slightly off center. These new frames are taking a little bit of getting used to. Well, welcome. Why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about yourself, Jessica, what you write? I think we're switched too. I don't know if thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Discombobulating. Because I love that cover and I want you to talk about it a little bit later if you can.
Oh, okay, cool.
But why don't you tell us a
All
little
right.
bit for people who maybe didn't see the other part?
All right. I'm Jessica Nettles. I am the author of The Children of Menlo Park. I write historical fantasy. I also write quiet horror and Southern Gothic horror. And I'm just really happy to be here and answer questions and just see where this conversation goes.
All right. Excellent. Yeah, I was taking a look at your website, obviously, and that cover just caught my attention for, I don't know, I think it's the tentacles, like how they kind of,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
really subtle, but it
Yeah.
calls to you in that Lovecraftian kind of way. So,
Yeah.
are you a big Lovecraft fan?
I am, and there is a Lovecraftian element to the book. And also just as a word about the cover of my artist was just fabulous. I had no idea it was going to be this beautiful. When I first saw it, I just about cried. I'm very emotional. So, I had no idea what the cover was going to look like. And then my publisher said, "Well, here's the cover." And I sat there for a minute and then just kind of did this. And then I'm like, it's beautiful. So, very thankful for that. Natanya Barron did the art. She's an artist with Falstaff Books. She's also an author. Um, so we just got really lucky. I just hope my next cover is as beautiful, you know. But yeah, there are Lovecraftian elements. The big bad is rather Lovecraftian.
Well, yeah, and I saw that the villain is, I don't know if this is really a spoiler, you can see it right away, but
Nah,
seems
it's
to be
fine.
Thomas Edison, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
did I
and
read
I
that
would
right?
argue that he's a bad guy in real life too. I'm probably going to tick some people off.
Well, yeah, he has
Wasn't
an
exactly
interesting
a great
history.
guy. Yeah.
Um,
Um, so yeah, he's our villain, but there's something that's bigger and badder than him behind all of that. So,
so did you take a lot of the real life stuff that's kind of come to light, pun totally intended,
um,
about
I I
Edison?
think I tinkered around with some of the real life stuff. Um, I played around with his relationship with Nikola Tesla because they had a real um, fractious relationship. I think that's a nice way to put it. Um, and kind of played around with that because the initial idea stemmed from, well, they hated each other, and Edison stole from Tesla and probably from some other people too. Um, but Tesla is the one that's the most famous for being stolen from, and there were lots of accusations that flew back and forth. And so I'm like, well, what if Tesla had other reasons for being mad at him besides being stolen from? And he discovered something that was really intensely awful, and decided to do something about it and got into more trouble.
As you do, as any good
Yeah,
protagonist does. Anita agrees that Edison sucked. I also agree, and Jessica does a marvelous job with the portrayal.
I love you, Joe.
Yes, flattery will get you everywhere with Jessica, right?
Absolutely.
And then you had to go throw in, you've got steampunk elements in there, mystery elements, ghosts, the supernatural. It's like a wonderful genre soup. And that's
Yeah.
one of the things that I think indies get away with in a
Oh,
more
yeah.
wonderful way. It's one of the
Yeah.
things that drew me to, you know, self-published too. So,
Yeah.
um, with the steampunk element, are there things that you like love as canon in steampunk? And then what did you do to it to kind of try to make it your own?
I really love, love the mixture of magic and mechanics, if that makes sense. Um, the whole idea that yeah, we've got these machines that are working by steam, but there might be some magical elements that are working along with it. So, for instance, I have an airship in the book, um, the Eclipse, and the Eclipse is going to make another appearance in the second book. Yes, there's going to be a second book. Um, the Eclipse runs it is an airship, and it runs the way a normal airship of the day would have worked. And there's a lot of elements of steam in that and all of that. But there's also maybe some magic that goes along with that.
Mm.
And the pilot may be more magical than we think. Um, so the way that I'm kind of messing with the steampunk element is the same way that I'm playing around with the historical elements. There's steampunk, but there's also like spaces to play with. So I play in the empty spaces of, how can I fill this with magic? How can I fill this with some weird little supernatural elements that I've found through research? And like, I think I could throw that there and make this do this. So, and in the book, I've got the airship, but I also have jetpacks. How does that work? Um, so I like tinkering around with the mechanical elements, but also, how do I fuse that with magic, and how do I fuse this in this alternative space of my view of American history too?
Yeah, and
I
then you
think I'm
throw
making
in,
sense.
yeah, absolutely. And then you throw in like the ghosts element of it
Yeah.
too. And
Oh
that
yeah.
gets me thinking about like running a ship on spirits, you know, like using them as
Yeah.
the fuel, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. In this case, there may be some other magical elements that I'm not willing to express
Mhm.
yet. Um, But the pilot has something interesting going on that's a secret that nobody knows, but I know it. It tickles me to pieces, and eventually we're going to find out what his secret is.
Mm,
And I think it's going to be hopefully it'll be a nice surprise for everybody. He does give hints though.
okay. See, enticing, just like those tentacles on the cover.
Absolutely. I want you to come back and read more,
Mm. It kind of reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if you're familiar with White Wolf, the company White Wolf.
Very much so.
Very much. Are you a gamer?
Yes.
All right, excellent. I am a diehard Vampire the Masquerader. Um, but Wraith the Oblivion kind of comes to mind for some reason with all of this. And how would you get down to the core of that and you come to realize that you die and that's not the end, and then your character has to kind of not only fight against their shadow self but fight against being made into like a table. For all
Oh,
eternity,
yeah.
to have to sit there in the afterlife as some mundane object that somebody puts their feet up
Right.
on. You know what I mean? And
Right.
that whole twist on it was, I thought, you know, genius. And I don't know why
Thank you.
it comes to mind so much, but there must be elements of that, is what I'm saying. And your
Y Well, it's that, and I don't know, I just have this overall feeling that you should have a choice after you die, what should happen. That's probably my own feeling about dying and my own dealing with being, how I feel about death in general. But initially, when I was kind of putting things together, I knew I needed detectives, and so I went to Pinkerton's, and um, I didn't want a male detective. And I know this is taking it probably way farther back than you want an answer for.
Oh,
Um,
please ramble on.
but
That's what we do best here in the second half, and probably the first, really.
but
Let's be real. The network
but
in
I just
general.
I discovered Kate Warren, she's a real lady, and she was the first lady Pinkerton. Kate died when she was 37 or 38 of tuberculosis, and she was a pretty fierce lady. She spied on the Confederacy for the Pinkertons. She broke several cases for them. She was one of Alan Pinkerton's most trusted detectives. He wrote about her several times. Um, but she died young, and I don't know. I was playing around with whether or not I wanted to use her, and then I discovered she died like maybe 20 years before when this story is set. And, I played with the timelines a little bit. Um, so it's a little different in my story, but, um, I got to thinking and I'm like, "Man, I bet that pissed her off." I bet dying really pissed her off because she seemed to really enjoy working, and she really seemed to be a very independent woman. She walked into his office and basically asked for the job of detective. There was no, begging. It was like, "You have a detective job, I want it." And he's like, "Okay."
See, we need more of that nowadays.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right?
And
I feel
and
like
and
there's
in
not enough
those
of that going
times,
on.
yeah, in the 1850s, that was unheard of for a
That took
woman.
a lot of chutzpah.
It did.
Oh my god,
So
I'm loving this woman more and more.
oh, she's amazing. So she dies, and I'm like, she would not be happy. So I'm like, what if she came back and just decided she was gonna keep working? Who would stop her? Nobody would stop her, and she would be perfect to do all the supernatural stuff, right?
Okay.
Because 'Cause she's got an edge. So I'm like, "Let's do it." And the more I worked with her, the more I learned about her, the more it seemed perfect. So that's the long answer
Did you ever,
for
like,
why
get
I
in
did that.
touch with, any of her descendants? Or
I
relative?
haven't,
That would be interesting to
haven't.
be like, "I wrote this book, and it's inspired by your,
Yeah.
you know,
It
great-grandmother,"
would be
or
it would
whatever.
be really interesting. I don't know that she had any children.
Hmm.
But she might
See?
have other, you know and eventually I might run into somebody that says to me, "Oh, well, I'm a niece, this far removed," and I'm like, "Okay, cool, let's talk." I'd like
I
to
think
get
it'd
to
be
know.
interesting. Like, like, if it
Yeah.
was one of my relatives, even if it was, like, a great-great aunt or whatever, I'd wanna know. I
Oh,
like that
yeah.
somebody wrote a book about them and read it.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
and she's becoming more popular. People are starting to catch on about her. When I first discovered her, there was not very much out there about her, and now I've seen her featured in 2 or 3 different TV series. There's one that's coming out, I think, next year about her. Um, she's been in a couple of books, and I've actually got another friend, and it's funny because she was developing the play at the same time I was writing the book, and we neither one of us knew this. She actually wrote a play about her.
Ah, interesting. That is like
Yeah,
what a
yeah,
amazing.
it was really strange. I didn't know it until she mentioned that it was being published, and I'm like, really? And I was so proud of her because it's actually a really good play. So um, kudos to her because before that point, before about 5 years ago, I'd never even heard of her. Um,
Yeah, it's like her
just
time to come back into the limelight. And then you wonder, like, is she behind the scenes in a supernatural way making this stuff happen? Because you have real life ghost experience as well
yeah,
that I
yeah,
want to know. I love real life ghost stories. So,
yeah, yeah. Ghost seeing runs in our family.
mm.
I don't see them. It skipped me. But my mother, my daughter,
You see them in a different way, though, because they
yeah,
come in through your writing, which is
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of influence there. Um, and it's literally been, I mean, it's one of those things where we've always talked about the supernatural in my family. It's not been something we shied away from, which is really funny when you also consider how religious my parents are.
Mm.
And yet we still talk about this other side of things too. So it's a strange combination.
I had a
Um,
friend whose mother was, very devout Christian, and she would put out milk and honey for the fae regularly. And when she was asked what the heck she was doing by people, she'd be like, "Oh, nothing." Like she'd just straight up deny it, but faithfully put it out, and just
that's what you do.
that's what she did. Which is
Yeah,
funny,
absolutely.
peculiar. So, um, I also see that because it was on your bio, obviously, and I saw that you have your familiars. So you do like tap
Yes.
into the supernatural lingo, right? I've got my two
Oh yeah.
familiars, my kitties. And their names caught my attention because you've got a ninja and a
Yep.
Luna. And I had a
Right.
cat named Luna.
Aw.
And then I currently have a ferret named Ninja.
Oh, how cool.
So I was like, that's interesting. But when I was preparing questions and stuff for this, my daughter came in, she's 9. And then the ferret is actually hers. And I was like, what do you think I should ask? And she was like, ask her how she feels about ferrets. Or if you like ferrets, I think she said.
I think ferrets are so cool. I don't know that I would have one, but I think they're very cool. Um, I've always thought they were cute. I just don't know if I would be the right person to have a ferret. She's probably better suited for it. Um, but they're awful cute.
They are, and I will attest to the fact that they're cute no matter what they're doing. Like, even if they're
Oh
doing
yeah.
naughty stuff, it's still cute. Like, I'm like, "Ah, I've never seen such a thing." So
Oh my gosh. The cuteness has saved my ninja more than one time because he's so doggone cute and he just looks at you and he's like, "Hi, mom," and I'm like, "You're so bad, but I love you."
it keeps them living, right?
Absolutely.
They know.
Absolutely.
They know.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, he knows. He knows he's adorable. And after this is over with, he'll cuddle with me and give me a kiss and it'll all be good, you know?
And I just wanted to say that, like, ferrets, just for anybody watching who's like, "Oh, ferrets are too stinky." They aren't if you feed them the right kind of food. It makes a huge difference. They still have a musk, but depending on what you feed them, like I feed them raw
Right.
food, raw ground up food, or feed her, and the smell is greatly reduced. Like
Well,
it's
I
it's
mean,
night and
that's
day.
what they're supposed to eat, right?
Hmm. Yep. So it takes a
So,
little bit, but it's not even that hard nowadays.
yeah,
Order ground up food in a bag. Don't have to make it yourself, you know. Anyway, that's a complete side tangent. I
that's
apologize.
okay.
But my daughter will be
Great
delighted
question.
if she watches this. So, and I think like putting animals within our stories, to me, there's like an immediate connection made with the reader
Oh,
almost, right?
yeah.
It's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I'm in it now. I'm invested. I've got two dogs in one of my stories, and like people were just biting their nails 'cause it's horror. They were like expecting me to kill the dogs. So they get more invested almost in the dogs than the humans, some people. So
Oh, oh yeah.
do you have some animals in this story?
I do not have animals. I don't tend to put animals much in my stories. Um, Now I say that I've got some stories that are not published yet, where I've got um, some familiars. I've got this set of stories that I'm kind of like slowly working on, where one of they're a trio of sister witches, and they're middle aged. It's my response to witches and the chosen one always being a teenage girl. So they're middle aged witches, and one of them has just discovered that she has powers, and so her familiar is a possum named Ezekiel. And so I've got him
Oh,
as
yes.
probably one of my first.
Mm,
Ezekiel talks and he smokes a pipe and is very sarcastic.
I'm
So
instantly
yeah,
endeared to this
it's
character
kind of fun.
because you
It's
can
kind
see
of
him with
fun. He's
his little
great.
possum claw, right? They
Oh
they can
yeah,
hold that
yeah.
pipe
Holding his.
easily.
Oh yeah. First time we meet him, he's sitting on her front porch and she is freaking out, calling her sister, going, "There's a possum on my front porch and he's talking to me. What do I do?"
Hold on, I'll be right over. Save some
I'm
mushrooms for me.
coming.
That
Yeah.
that's the response. I used to have we lived out in the country and I had a possum who would come sit outside of we had a big sliding door on our porch, sliding glass door, and he'd come sit. You just see his eyes
Oh wow.
reflecting and just
Wow.
stare in like I was TV.
Wow.
So
Wow.
they've got some interesting personalities, and
Oh,
then he'd
yeah.
open the door and
Yeah.
they'd like run off. But
Yeah. Now
it's
I
an
had heard
interesting and
some.
unique choice for an
I think
animal to
so,
add
and I
in.
heard something interesting about them recently, and I'm trying to find out if it's actually true. I've heard that under, like, black light, they actually glow pink. I don't know if that's true. I don't know. There's somehow or another their fur picks up the UV light somehow. I'm going to do some research and find out if that's true or not, because if it
You
is
have
true,
to. You got to use that.
I have got to put that in a story because
No,
I think that
even
would
if it
just be
isn't.
hilarious.
It's your story, and especially if it's supernatural, maybe that's where the rumor came from, was from that possum. Ezekiel
Oh,
is the
oh,
one,
it would
right?
probably. He probably is.
And
Yeah.
no other possum does. But then we, the
But he
reader,
does,
know.
maybe.
But he
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Maybe he got into some paint or something that he eats.
I have a feeling he got cursed. He got in the
Curse.
middle of a curse or something. Yeah. Yeah. So
I
no,
love
I
it.
actually saw a picture of this on Facebook. That doesn't mean anything. I know it has no value in terms of research. But if he's the one that started it, I'm all for it. And he's like, yes. He's in my head going, yeah, I think that's pretty cool. So he really wants to glow pink, and I really want to have an occasion for this to happen in
Oh,
the
that's even
story where
better if you
something's
see it.
happening and he starts glowing pink, because it'd be really funny. Um,
See,
I think it would
live
freak
right here, we've
everybody out.
got the creative process, wheels turning.
Absolutely.
Ah, it's so
Half the
free.
fun of it.
Mhm. Takes you out of the mundane reality, right? Into the world of the fantastic. And you're a huge Gaiman fan. I was seeing that in the comments earlier.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna be able to talk to Jessica. 'Cause
Oh,
he
yeah.
is.
Oh, yeah.
Anansi Boys is, and
Oh
I can
yeah,
never pronounce it correctly, so excuse me. You read
Anansi.
it, you read it, you don't
Yeah.
hear it, unless it's audio, I guess, but is one of my favorites. So,
Oh yeah, it was a great book.
can you pick a
I
favorite
really
of Gaiman? I think sometimes that's not fair.
it really isn't fair. I got into him, and this sounds it's going to sound really strange. I got into him um in the late 90s reading The Sandman,
Mm,
and someone suggested it to me. I was going through a really nasty divorce. So I was really in a dark place. So probably in all reality, I probably shouldn't have been reading The Sandman. But
but sometimes it can be
it
healing, right?
but it really kind of it gave me a place to put all that dark energy, and I don't know, it helped. And then I started reading other things. I read Neverwhere after that, which is still probably one of my favorite of his novels, although I do love Anansi Boys too.
Hmm.
Um, and then, Smoke and Mirrors probably is my absolute, like, baseline Gaiman kind of thing. That's where I read that when I went back to college, that same year. I got a divorce, I went back to college, age 30, um, and I got a hold of Smoke and Mirrors, and Smoke and Mirrors is a collection of short stories. I don't know if it's still in print or not, it should be. Um, and it really kick-started me back to writing again, because I'd
Mm.
stopped writing for 10 years. I got married and I stopped writing,
Uh,
and, it really kick-started me because he had short stories, but he had bits in front of it where he explained the process, and he talked about the process that he went through for each story, and for me, it was just I don't know, it shook everything inside of me, and I'm like, "I think I can do this again."
I bet he would love to hear that story, like how he inspired you to such a degree.
Yeah, I would hope he would.
Mhm.
It really made a difference, and it's still I'll tell young authors all the time, "Get that, read that book, and learn craft." That's a good place to start learning craft, and he really talked a lot about, his craft, his process of how did I work through these ideas, and a lot of his methodology lined up with kind of the way my brain works, um, which seems so crazy, but yeah, um,
No, because we gravitate towards like
yeah,
frequencies, right?
yeah, exactly, and it really started motivating me to try again and to keep going and to dabble in the weird, even more than I had before, and maybe dabble in the darkness a little bit more. So he sent me off in the right direction. It's a great book.
That is an excellent story. Anita was saying that The Ocean at the End of the Lane is her favorite.
Mhm.
Um, that is, I found that book to be delightful as well. So good taste there. Not surprised. So we are getting to the end here now. And I usually will ask like how deep your hatred for David Green runs, and if you thought that his decision was just, or if you would like to, find him in a dark alley somewhere.
I'm not quite ready to gut him yet.
Mm.
I don't
Or-
hate him deeply yet. Now, if I went back on and he ruled against me again, I might gut him. But no, I thought he was being pretty fair. And w honestly, um, the other arguments were a little stronger. Uh, Maybe I was having an off night, I don't know. I think he was pretty fair.
Right.
I would still buy him beer if I got a chance to sit down and meet him.
Well, there you
I
go,
wouldn't
David.
try to kill him yet. I wouldn't try to kill him yet. There's still time though. Still
I'd say,
time.
yeah, give him a little bit. It was close, one of the closer ones I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would
Okay.
say so. I would say so. I had a good time.
So then my next question is, how do you feel about garden gnomes?
Ooh.
Right?
I think they're pretty dang tacky. And quite frankly, if I had them in my garden, I'd feel probably a lot older than I really am. It would
Ah.
really kick off that old lady vibe, and I'm not really sure I'm ready for that.
Do you know that they have lots of different garden gnomes now? Like, so they've got
Yeah.
the regular old school ones, and then they have like ones that are skeletons or ones that are riding dinosaurs, you know?
Now, I have seen a Star Trek version of Garden Gnomes. I could get into that.
See? I feel like they
Yeah,
knew that they were like creeping people out, and so they tried to get into the cultural zeitgeist in
I
different
think
ways.
so. I think so. Maybe if I could bring them to life and use them as an army.
Mm. I think there was a Goosebumps episode or and book
Yeah.
like that
Yeah, I
I remember
think
seeing.
so.
My
Yeah.
daughter was really
Maybe
into
I could. Yeah.
Goosebumps. Oh.
Yeah, I wasn't really by the time Goosebumps came out, I was already in my 20s, so and I was working at the bookstore selling them to small children, so
They sure are beloved, though, I'll say that.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
all right, well, why don't you wrap things up, kind of tell people where they can find you, and you talked a little bit about some of the projects on the horizon. You got your possum, possibly, but
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to finish up those stories and then find a publisher maybe, and we'll see. I'm still playing around with those. So you can find me at jessicanettlesauthor.com. Nikki already found the website, and apparently it's awesome. So
it
go
is.
find the
It's easily
website. It is awesome.
navigatable and succinct. So
Yes,
go there.
go there. You can buy my books on Amazon. If you're not really crazy about Amazon, because some people are not, you can go to the Falstaff Books website, which I think is falstaffbooks.com. I think that's right. John's going to kill me. I think it's falstaffbooks.com. We're now doing something with Shopify, so you can buy my book through Shopify if
Okay.
you really hate Amazon. Um, let's see what else. I also am in a couple of anthologies. A couple of three anthologies. A Woman Unbecoming through Cone Girls Press, which came out, just stop and think, last year. Um, I'm in Lonely Hollows. Let's see if I can get this so people can see this. Yeah. I'm in Lonely Hollows, which you can find on Amazon. Um, this is my horror. And I'm also in an anthology called League of Monsters, which you can find on Amazon as well. My next book, um, which I am trying desperately to finish because my publisher wants it, should be called Kudzu Ridge. It is not connected to the Children of Menlo Park. It is a secondary world that's set in the near future in North Georgia. It's North Georgia meets kaiju monsters.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, with a little bit of magic involved. So that's
There are
some. It was
possibilities here. Yes.
Oh, yeah. It's a novel I started while I was editing children because I was fidgety and needed something to do. So I am also in the process of working on the second Kate and Shadow novel, which will be the sequel to Children of Menlo Park. Um, it's set in Savannah. There are werewolves, and it should be fun.
Here there be
Got
werewolves.
8 chapters. There'll be werewolves, and other crazy things. Some people will be returning. So if you're fond of certain characters, they may come back. Who knows? Um,
So you'll have to have
I've got 8
enticing
chapters.
claws coming out of the next one instead of tentacles.
Yeah, that would be cool. Claws and yeah, yeah, I can see that. Um, but I don't even have a title for it yet. I'm working on that. But there's 8 chapters, and hopefully before it's over with, there'll be a whole lot more. So
All right.
stay tuned, folks.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for everybody in the audience for coming to the Basking in the Evergreen. Remember, it's always time to go indie now.